This is the Flipping Junkie podcast, episode 36. Welcome to the Flipping Junkie podcast. My name is Danny Johnson, former software developer turned house flipper, flipping hundreds of houses. Each week, we bring you interviews, strategies, stories, and motivation to help you get started flipping houses and on your way to becoming your own boss and achieving financial freedom. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's get to it. Hey guys, welcome back to the Flipping Junkie podcast. This week, I've got Don Costa on the show. We're going to talk about joint venturing to fund our flips. And if you don't know, joint venturing is basically when you partner up with somebody that's got the funds to do the deals and then splitting the profits on the back end. And we'll get into all the awesome details and discuss all that with Don. And Don is a married father of 3 incredible kids. He's been in the real estate business for over 10 years. He started knocking on doors and wholesaling properties, and then he quickly moved over to flipping houses, so fix and flips. He took some time off during the crash 2008, jumped back in 2012, and currently he's on track to do 100 flips this year. So he absolutely loves what he does, and he loves helping other people get into the business. And so that's why we've got him on the show today to discuss joint venturing to fund our flips. And, thanks again. I want to just mention real quick, thank you for listening to Flipping Junkie Podcast. I know there's a lot of other podcasts to listen to. Thank you very much for tuning into this one. Really do appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed on iTunes, please do. That way you can get each new episode each week that we release on Mondays. And we're doing that series right now, if you're not aware, where we started several episodes back, probably 12 or 15 episodes back, where we started with the foundation and mindset of getting into flipping houses and real estate investing. And it's really helpful for a lot of people to provide motivation to keep them going in the beginning, as I'm sure even the experienced of us are aware that it can seem like a big uphill battle at the beginning before you get the momentum built. So that's what that part of the series was for. Then we went into building our team so that everybody would start with an idea of who you need to have on your team to help you along this path of success in real estate investing on your way to achieving financial freedom. And now we're into the phase of funding. So obviously, if you're going to be doing any fix and flips and things like that, you're going to need to have, unless you've got a ton of money, you're going to need to have funding to be able to buy these houses and pay for these rehabs so that you don't get into a bind and end up not being able to finish a rehab. So we're discussing all that right now. Last episode we did was last week, and we talked about private money with Jason Bible. Awesome episode if you didn't listen to it, at flippingjunkie.com/35. That's flippingjunkie.com/35. And if you go to the show notes page there for that episode, I also have a download guide for finding and working with private lenders where I show you how we found some of our first private lenders that we used. And today we still mainly just use private funding because we get better rates and terms for those loans. But we did start with joint venturing, actually, in the very beginning with one of our first mentors had put up the funds and we split the profits. And that's how we actually got our very initial start in this business. So listen up in this episode. It's absolutely something that you can plan towards and find people to work with to get you started if you're having trouble finding funding. And it's a great way to also learn from other people if you joint venture with somebody who's got a lot more experience than you. So enjoy the episode. Have a great week. And, listen to the episode first, then have a great week. But we'll get started. All right, Don, you on the call?
I am, definitely.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with everybody, all the listeners for the Flipping Junkie podcast about joint venturing. Do you want to start with, how you got into the business and a little bit of background?
Absolutely. So I had got into the business in 2003. I had wanted to get into the business for a number of years before that. My brother and I would go and watch auctions, and, I was following Carlton Sheets and different trainers, but just kind of never really pulled the trigger, I guess, analysis paralysis. And in 2003, I got married, and my wife basically was just like, you need to go out and get a job. And I wasn't about to do that, but I knew that because it wasn't in me at the time. Right. But I knew that I had only one opportunity to make my dream happen before I had kids, because I knew once I had kids, that was it. So it was kind of like one of those seize the moment situations. And so I went out and started interviewing with mortgage companies. because I felt like that was an avenue to learn the finance to get into real estate investing. And in one of the interviews, one of the guys, asked me, he's like, why do you want to be a loan officer? And I was like, honestly, I don't. I want to be a flipper. I want to be a real estate investor, and I want to learn the business side of it, the financing side of it. And it was the weirdest thing, because he kind of set up in his desk and leaned forward, and he's like, all right, you go find some properties and I'll put up the money, and let's see what happens. And I was kind of like in awe in the moment, and I was like, okay, well, let's see if this guy's real. And I went out and I got a notice of default list, and I got in my car and I started knocking on doors and just, I guess, building rapport, making friends, and started getting deals. Had a knack for locking people up in contract, and the guy actually started, buying the houses. So
nice. So what did you do? Like, whenever he said, you find the deals and I'll put up the money, was there any discussion of what it would look like if that did happen? I mean, what was the discussion at that point?
That discussion kind of evolved over the next couple of weeks. At the end of the moment, I think I was more in awe of, okay,
Yeah.
This is, let's see if this thing is real. He just basically said, go get them, go get them, and I'll put the money up. And, I think when I walked out the door at that time, there was, I was definitely naive. I don't know that I really knew the questions to ask. And then as we started, as I started bringing some potential deals in, we started kind of discussing it, and it turned into a situation where, he'd put up I'd go find the projects, and he'd put up the money, and we kind of worked together to get them done, rehabbed and sold, and then we split the profit. And that's what it morphed into at that time. Nice.
So he didn't, so there was no interest or anything like that. There's no points, no interest. It was just basically he put up all the money. I'm sure it was probably, when you guys were buying them, how were you, whose name was on the deed kind of thing?
In that, there's in that particular situation with this gentleman, his name was on the deed, and he bought him, and basically I went in and did whatever I needed to do as far as helping manage the rehab, and then basically when they sold, we'd sit down and figure out what the profit was, and he'd give me my check. So there was no interest, there was no points, and then I kind of progressed from that. I started kind of branching out and contacting competitors. Like, I'd go to the door and I'd beat somebody out of a contract on a property, and I would, I'd look back at them and go, okay, I got the deal, but you have the money. I'll do all the work on this project. You put up the money and we'll do a profit split. And in that, and as I started to progress and got more savvy in it, I started to realize that I could kind of control the deals better, if that makes sense, as far as, we start closing them in my company name. I'd take on more management role in the projects, because at that point I was learning more, and they just put up the money. And so it basically progressed into a situation where the had no involvement in the project, other than they'd write the check to buy the property and write the check to cover the rehab, and I handled everything from point A to point Z.
Wow, nice. So in the beginning, the deal was a little bit more secure for the guy putting up the money, the partner that was putting up the money, because obviously he had all the risk.
Right, and I had zero experience, so.
Right,
yeah.
And so as time went on, then you had, had that experience, and so people could trust you to manage it right, and, be trustworthy because you've dealt with them before, and were able to allow you to put the properties in your name or your company name, right?
Absolutely.
And then have like a first lien position or something on it?
Generally, they would have a deed of trust on the property for the money they're going to invest, and that's the way we do it today. I basically built my business on the joint venture, because when I started with nothing. When I say nothing, I literally had just an unemployment check. I had zero credit, and my unemployment check covered my rent and my car payment and a little bit of food. And barely that. And so I literally, there was no getting into the real estate business without the opportunity of a JV partner, because they handled everything. I didn't have a monthly payment. I didn't have to put a down payment down. They covered it. And all I had to do is get in there and get the work done. And, it was just a great, for me getting started, it was a great way to build the foundation of my business. I could do multiple projects, if I was able to get them in contact without having to about where the money was going to come from. And so, yeah, it was great. And then as we, as we progressed and got more sophisticated and started putting the projects in our name, what we would do is give them a deed of trust for their interest to make sure they're secure. And, basically we moved on that way.
Wow, nice. Yeah, so you brought up several good points that I wanted to touch on again, because, there's a lot of people that say, well, you can't, make money without money, and you can't really do this business without having money, at least some money to spend on marketing and things like that. And it's really a matter of how the way you look at it. So you started without money, like literally.
Literally.
And that's why you went out and you didn't set up a website and try to do SEO for a long time and do it that way. You went and did the thing that you had to do because you didn't have the money, which was beat the streets,
right,
and knock on doors. And so you were willing to do, like, you just sat down and figured out what you had to do based on your circumstances, and then ended up having this work out that way. And that's really incredible, the way it was like it was meant to be when you ran into the guy
right,
that was first willing to work
right.
with you.
I describe it as opportunity and hard work, or hard work and preparation meets opportunity. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of how it came down. It had been my dream. I had studied it, and then all of a sudden the opportunity was handed to me, and there was just no way that I was going to let it go. And, with that, I had done, trust me, I had done door-to-door before with vacuum sales and alarm sales, and I sucked. I mean, I didn't last 3 days in any of those jobs, so it wasn't like I had a knack for door-to-door and experience. It was just like I had been handed something, and there was no way I was going to let it go. I was going to find these properties. I was going to find these sellers, and get this thing done, because I had the money, right? So I had to do it. And so I just went door-to-door and made it happen, and built it that way.
Wow, nice. So you were doing that for how many years were you doing the joint ventures? And so I guess you said you still do that to this day. You still partner that way, right?
I still do joint ventures. Yeah, I did joint ventures from 2003 to 2008 till around the time the market slowed and crashed. And that was basically all I did was joint ventures. And the way it's interesting the way I bought, because most of what I bought was notice of defaults, and I did subject to purchasing, and then I would JV partner for the money to pay the homeowner and do the rehab. And so it allowed, us to maximize our return on investment that way. And it's a little more complicated, I'm sure, for a totally different show. But so I did all JV through that situation, through that time frame. And then I took the time off, and when I came back in 2012 to do it again, I reached out to investors at JV, again, because I was limited on my accessible capital, and I knew I wanted to build a company that focused on volume flipping. So I reached out to JV partners, and for the first couple of years, that's all we did. And again, the way we structured it this time was, we're the manager. We come in, we find the project, we manage the rehab, we sell it, and we split the profit. And, in return, for the 50-50 profit, and you put your money up, we'll give you a deed of trust to cover you and secure you. And we did that for a number of years before we branched out to rate and term investors, which we do work with a lot of rate and term investors now, but we still do JV to manage cash flow. Because as well as I do, Danny, that in this business, you can only do so many projects before you kind of tie your hands on capital. And from the business perspective, that's the last thing I want to do. So we still, to this day, have great relationships with joint venture partners.
Yeah, you always have to have a source, even if it's more expensive or you're giving up a little bit more. Why give up on a deal because you're going to pay more for it? So you miss out on making $25,000, $30,000 just because you didn't want to pay an extra $2,000 in holding cost.
Right.
But, so that's great. So what I want to do is maybe take this from a perspective of somebody that is starting in this business, has the drive, the desire to make it happen just like you did, and give them the benefit of the years of experience of setting these kind of deals up and showing them how to approach it. So if you wanted to get into it, where would you start? Would you start looking for deals? Would you start approaching people at the RIA meetings? And how could you walk us through that pretty in detail?
Absolutely. I've posted, back in 2012, I posted an ad on Craigslist, in all honesty, hey, I'm an investor, I'm a go-getter, I can get the deal done, I'm looking for capital. And one of the JV partners that I ended up working with came from Craigslist, believe it or not. It's probably not the most ideal way of doing it, but it was successful for me. RIAs, I've reached out in RIAs in conversations and talking to people, finding out they have capital. Maybe they have capital and want to get into the real estate investing business, but they don't have a lot of experience, or they're not comfortable managing their rehab and they want somebody to do it for them. You just get conversations going. You let them know what you're doing. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is just, this is what we're doing. This is, what we're successful at, or, when you're new, you just let them know, hey, I'm willing to do all the work. I'm just looking for the money side of it. Let's partner. And you'd be amazed at how many people are open to it. I think the hardest part is once you get them, doing JVs for you for a long time successfully, converting them over to cheaper money is it's harder, but getting started, it's a fantastic way to start.
Yeah, and a point you had just made was, I would think from somebody new in the business perspective, approaching people about putting up the money and splitting the deal, like you'll do all the legwork, and you might feel like, well, I mean, I don't have the experience, so how are they going to take me seriously, or why would they be willing to do that with me if I've never done a deal before? And it's all about you selling them on, them making the easy return, the big return on the investment. And, it's basically the money secured by the property and
right.
and everything. And so you tell them you could even put it in their name if you trust them or feel like you could trust them,
right?
To not just kick you out of the whole thing after you found the deal and everything. But basically, they don't have to accept it until they see what kind of deal it is. So obviously, if you said, you just wanted to start the conversation and kind of get a soft commitment to it, you go out and find a deal, and then you guys can talk further. And basically, once you show an awesome deal, who's going to want to not be a part of it?
Right. The money is always available. It's a good deal. Another way too, basically like my first handful of deals with JV partners as I was learning the business was a situation, like you said, where the properties went into their name or their company name. But, they did a majority of the work. I remember the second JV investor that I worked with, I went out and found the deal. And he bought it, rehabbed it, and still split the profit with me.
Oh, nice.
So, it's kind of like, instead of just wholesaling it to him, I managed to talk him into a partnership situation where he was willing to, do a split.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. So, there's all kinds of opportunities out there. You just got to have conversations with people. You got to let them know what you're doing or what you want to be doing and how you're going to be doing it and what experience you bring to the table that's going to allow you to accomplish that goal. Who else have you met in your conversations and networking that you can go to as an advisor? If you can show people that you have the right team in place, the right people to go to for the information, sometimes that helps. So you can't sell yourself short. You just got to get out there and talk to people, and there's going to be the opportunity.
Right. So are there any agreements that you signed, like legal documents or anything for setting up any of these? Have you ever done that or recommend doing that?
I definitely do recommend that. I will say that when I was new in the business, that was like the furthest thing from my mind. My thing was just go out and get deals. But we have, like, for instance, we've put together a joint venture agreement that kind of spells out, how everything works. Basically, when they're supposed to put the money up for the purchase, when they're supposed to put the money up for the rehab, that we're managing the project, how the funds will be dispersed when we sell. And we have a pretty decent agreement put together. We also do the deed of trust on the property. When we close the escrow, they get a deed of trust on the property so that their investment is secured. So those are the two documents we typically use now with JV partners.
Okay. And how did you have that document made and know what to put in the document?
It was something that I had put together through kind of marrying several documents, and then I'm fortunate enough to have some phenomenal friends that are attorneys to review them and make any tweaks and changes we need to make on them. It's something that I could probably forward the document to you, honestly, and it's something that people can they can know it was not written by an attorney, it was reviewed by an attorney, and they need to take it to their attorney, but it's something they can use as a foundation. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, if you provide it, we can put it on the show notes page at flippingjunkie.com/36.
Absolutely.
And so if I get that from Don, that'll be there for you to download. That's awesome. I really appreciate it, because I think that's something that stops a lot of people if they hear someone say, well, I have the document or the agreement signed, and that kind of set everything in writing to be the way it should be. But that leaves so many, unknowns. Like, what should that say exactly? And like you said, for sure, have that checked out by a local,
Absolutely,
qualified attorney to make sure that that's valid for where you are and it makes sense.
absolutely. So, there's another one document we use with a group. We have I want to say it's an accounting firm that we work with. They have a fund that they fund our projects off of, and it's a JV situation, and we do a memorandum of understanding with them, basically that covers kind of the understanding that how funds are going to be dispersed again. But it's kind of a blanket for all projects we do together. That's something that's probably a little more complicated. But if you're going to get into business with somebody that you're going to be doing business with for like going period of time, it might be good just to draft kind of an umbrella document that just says that we manage it, you fund it, this is how we disperse the profits, and so on and so forth. So,
all right. So do you ever work out any joint venture agreements and partner with people to do anything other than 50-50?
We do. We've gotten, part of it is obviously as you grow and you get more experience and you're able to bring more to the table, you can always negotiate more favorable terms. And we have 60-40s and 70-30s now that we've worked out with individuals. So we don't ever give up more than 50%. I know that there are some investors that want the flip side to be 60 or 70% to them. The one thing that I want to make sure everybody knows, because it was hard for me and I struggle with it, was you got to know your value going into the transaction, what you're bringing to the table and the work you're doing. And, you got to hold your ground. If the only money you can get to get that deal done and you have a hot deal is not, a 50-50 split, it's better for the investor. I'm not going to say don't take that deal, but always try to negotiate, at least a 50-50 split on your end, because you're definitely, bring your share to that partnership.
Right. And sometimes also when you start out, like, you're setting the, I don't know what the term for it is.
Setting the standard.
Yeah, setting the standard there. So that's what's going to be expected from then on. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it does take a little bit of a standing ground to get a better rate. And I think people appreciate that, with private lenders and partnering. When you show that you've got enough business sense to negotiate, I think people feel a little bit more comfortable too, knowing that they're dealing with somebody that's not just a pushover and that doesn't try to get, better terms for themselves.
Absolutely.
But so what? Okay, so I brought up the non-50-50 because everybody thinks JV 50-50, but it doesn't have to be that way. And like you said, you have structured them differently based on what you are bringing to the table and what the other side's bringing to the table at your different experience levels. I've also heard of people getting deals from wholesalers and other people by saying that after they sell it, if they can sell it for this amount, that they'll give them an extra, $5K or something. And so they get deals where they're not paying as much for the house as a competitor would because they structured it like a small deal to give a sort of kickback at the end. Right. Have you heard of doing that, or do you do anything like that?
Yes, I have it, and I can't say that I haven't. I have in the sense that, I've had wholesalers come to me and say, hey, I want 10,000, or whatever their fee is, and or 5,000 or whatever, and I've looked at it and I've looked at their fee and the purchase price and the numbers it's going to take to get done and what we think we can sell it for, and I go back to them and go, okay, I don't think that I'm going to profit. What you're saying, I'm going to profit, in my experience, which is greater than yours, I don't think I'm going to be there. But if by chance, I'm wrong and you're right, I'll give you more on the back end. I've done that type of situation to try to be because I want to be as fair as possible. Right. So I've definitely done that on a few occasions to try to be fair, and especially when we're working with newer wholesalers and we're trying, the book says ask for 10 and the projects, the numbers say you should only get 5. I've definitely done that. And there's been one or two times where I've come back and said, all right, you get a little bit more. I love to be wrong and make more money. So, it's definitely happened. So, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's an underutilized thing. And I bring it back. It's like I want to make a note and make sure make sure that I do that too, because I think sometimes we're all in a hurry and it's just like either the price is good and you make your offer, or you forget it and move on to the next one. But sometimes you can work deals like that to where you're still going to make a great deal on it, and you're kind of making sure of that by saying, you'll get an extra bid at the end if I can sell it for this amount.
Absolutely. Like I've done, 10% of my profit at the back end. I've done, a certain percentage of the extra money we make. I've done, I've structured it so many different ways. You just got to work that out with the individual you're working it with. But that's one of the ways we just don't say no, because we try to make every deal work that we can, for sure, if we can make money on them. So.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I think that percentage, that's a great idea, percentage instead of saying I have to sell it for this much. So what, we talked about all the good times you've had and the good deals that you've done with joint venturing. So have you had any problems?
With joint venturing, so the very first investor I worked with worked out great for a while. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons, it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me was that the guy turned out to be, and I don't want to say a crook because I don't think he's a crook, but a little greedy. It got to a point where he realized, that I was so good at bringing in deals and how much money he'd make if he didn't pay me that, he decided that he was going to take his time rehabbing properties to try to string me out. So, that's where I learned to kind of put projects in my name, make sure things are documented, do contracts and that kind of thing. But what that did is it forced me to branch out to other investors, branch out to other opportunities. I started wholesaling contracts. My first wholesale, I think I made 10 grand. The next project I did was a double escrow where we made 20 grand. So, it forced me to kind of jump out and look for alternative ways of doing it. And then, like I said, I started knocking on doors and beating out my competitors. So I reached out to my competitors and said, hey, I'm better at closing than you, but you got money, so let's partner. And I have some great relationships that I still have to this day. I mean, I have some investors that, now that, are friends now that were investors then, investors now that I consider family, that were competitors, at the doorstep. So
that's pretty amazing. So they were literally at the house and you were able to close the sellers and they weren't?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, in California for notice of defaults, we have a 5-day right of rescission. And so you put somebody in contract, you can't have them sign a deed or give them any money for 5 days. So I got good at coming in behind somebody, in that 5-day right of rescission and kind of unwinding their deal. Awesome. And getting the transaction, for myself, or just being a better negotiator before that point. And so, because it was, they do it to me, I do it to them, but I just got better at it. So, but
that's pretty awesome because you turned around and made deals with them.
I turned around. I said, I'm going to get this in contract. You're not, and I don't want to, I don't want to just steal it from you. Let's, you got money and I'll do the work and, let's be partners, let's make money together. And, one particular individual literally at the house, I walked up, she was sitting in the car and I walked up to the window and gave her that pitch and she's like, all right, let me think about it, and called me the next day. And it's been a friend ever since.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So any other things come up where somebody's fought you on what the numbers were, or anything else ever come up that was sort of a hassle that you would have rather not dealt with? As far as JVs? Yeah. Yeah, for the most part, I want to say no, just because I've been very good at keeping, documentation and records and that kind of thing. I think, investors as a whole, I call it managing personalities. They're all different. Our rate and terms, our JVs are all different. Some of them, like I had one JV partner I worked with that, basically how we work is our contractor goes out and bids the whole job. They bid the job, materials, labor, everything, right? So whatever he pays for paint, he pays for paint. I don't care. He gives me, if he gives me $1 a square foot to paint a house and he goes buys the paint, if he's got paint left over, he gets to keep it. And, but this one particular investor would always be like, well, are you buying paint for this house and then using it on a different house? And are you doing this? And she never really got the,
I'm paying him this to paint it. Doesn't matter what he's doing with materials.
Right.
She never really got that. She was thinking, okay, well, if you have leftover paint from this job, you're using it on another job, and we should get the benefit of the doubt. And so I've had stuff like that come up, and you learn, like any relationship, which ones are going to be, beneficial to your business for the long term and which ones aren't. So I've also had some incredibly, wonderful people through the years that I've worked with that are just phenomenal and great. And so I think with everything, you just gotta know your value, stand your ground, stick to your principles, and you always be respectful, always be honest, and you just do your best.
Yeah. Is there whenever you're talking to new potential JVs, and do you do anything to verify that they are legit as far as having the money to be able to do, to close on a property? Or is there any, or do you just trust them on that if you agree to do a deal, that they're going to be able to close on it?
The answer would be the same as before. When in the beginning I was naive, and no, I didn't do any of that. I just was like, okay, I have a deal. Do you have the money to do it? And so in that particular sense, no. And I guess I always lucked out because they always were able to come through. Now, we have, usually the people we work with now are people that are referred to us through somebody, or we have some kind of understanding of who they are, 'cause again, we're at a different level. So we have different, not necessarily, we don't vet them. We don't ask them, not always for proof of funds, I guess, but we have an understanding of their capabilities, through various sources, in the business. So most investors we work with now have, been investors with competitors or friends of ours. And so, we know that they're able to pull the trigger. If we get somebody that's like brand spanking new, which we haven't done in a while, I guess, we probably would go through an extra step just to make sure. But even then, I guess the honest answer is we have other money. Mm-hmm. So if we call them up and they say they can't do it, it's not like our deal is not going to get funded. So for somebody starting out new, it's always good to have a heart-to-heart conversation, I guess, about what your abilities are and what their abilities are. Make sure you're covered. So yeah, I mean, in that particular situation, but for us, if somebody can't perform, we have somebody else.
Right. How many would you say would be the most that you've ever had at one time working on deals with you? Investors?
Yeah. Yeah. So I do one deal, one investor, period. But I would say probably at the most at any given time, we've probably been working with six joint venture partners.
Wow. And how do you structure usually the draws for the rehabs?
For our particular business, we're probably a little unique in the sense, basically we have a system with our vendors, invoices in by a day, a certain day, checks out by a certain day. And so basically we get their invoices in, we cut their checks, and then we submit that information to our investors for reimbursement. And so whenever we buy a property, the investor holds back the rehab funds, and we just submit each week for whatever that reimbursement is. And that way there's clear documentation. All the receipts are submitted, and when we go to close out the file, especially with our JV partners, when we go to close out the file, there's no question as to what the expenses were on an ongoing basis. So
right, nice. So drew a blank there for a second. It's always these early afternoons. We're recording this in early afternoon, and so I end up with a cup of coffee, and sometimes my brain just kind of blanks out.
Yeah, right.
So I apologize for that to everybody. But so you mentioned the one time about the paint. Do you find that you ever deal with sort of micromanaging investors that are wanting to know exactly what's going on with everything, every step of the way?
Again, like I said before, it's kind of managing personalities. I mean, I've had through the years, and I've had investors that have wanted to try to dictate like what paint color the wall's going to be, or different things, or come in and say, you should do this all white, or you should do this all this, and so I've kind of, one of the reasons why our JV agreement says we manage the project, we manage it. That's it. There's there's not a whole bunch of chiefs, there's one chief, and it's us. And so just because of stuff like that, but I think if you set the expectation up ahead of time, right from the beginning, you set the standard, set the expectation on both ends, there isn't an issue. I still have, I have one guy that's a rate and term investor to this day, that will go every week before he submits the reimbursement, to check the property to make sure we're at where we say we're at. And that's fine. I don't care. That's fine. If you want to check to make sure we're doing what we're saying we're doing, we are doing what we're saying we're doing. So more power to you. It's the ones that want to get in and try to, insert, I guess their opinion. It's like, we're the ones that are doing this. We know it sells, and that's not ego. It's just at the end, I want to make sure that it's the best result for all of us, and if our project's being held up because we can't make a decision, or, the design comes together funky because there's too many opinions, that doesn't help anybody, Yeah.
And last thing you want is somebody that doesn't know about rehabbing and goes in and makes the rookie mistake of over rehabbing a house because they're thinking, it's like they've got to make it nice enough for them to want to live in it, and it's not the way it should be. Right.
Then, there are color palettes. I mean, you got to be, you got to have some design, but it's got to be neutral enough to appeal to buyers. You don't want to have a black bathroom with, like an orange toilet, you know what I'm saying? So.
Or murals, right?
Right, exactly. So, and some people, some, like you said, they want to rehab it to the house that they want to live in, and your taste may not be my taste, and you got to find that balance in a rehab. So.
Well, excellent. And I think we pretty much covered everything that I wanted to touch on is basically how you got into it, how you've been approaching them and using them. And I think a lot of questions about how to structure those with the agreement will be answered by you graciously providing that agreement for us to be able to, the listeners to be able to download from flippingjunkie.com/36. On the show notes page, we'll answer a lot of those things. And a lot of good points about standing your ground on knowing how much value you bring to the table and, getting at least the 50% split at the back end of it. Right. And the fact that, partnerships aren't always cut and dry, 50-50. You do all the finding of the deal, fixing it up and selling it, and they just provide the money. Sometimes it's, the other side where the person providing money is also handling the rehab. So that's interesting to hear the different ways that goes down.
Absolutely. There's so many ways to do it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it, Don. And is there a way that anybody can, if they want to reach out to you and talk to you about anything, is there a way for them to find you?
Absolutely. You can always email me at don@strategicrei.net. I do reply to my email if anybody wants to email me with any questions. We're setting up a video site to kind of do video documentation of like some of the problems we run into when we're flipping or with title companies or contractor issues, called the 5-Minute Flip. .com, where they can go and register there for the launch. And then, of course, as we mentioned before the podcast, I'm getting ready to launch a podcast. And if they register at 5-Minute Flip or email me, I'll notify them when we get that off the ground. So.
Oh, nice. So is that the 5-Minute Flip or just 5-Minute Flip?
They can use either one, the 5minuteflip.com, or they can do 5minuteflip.com. Either way, it's fine.
All right. And the number 5?
And number 5 or spelled. I got them all.
Oh, nice.
So,
covered.
Cover my bases.
Yeah. It's funny because whenever when I was setting up Lead Propeller, the real estate investor websites that we provide, when I was setting up the name, I spent so long trying to figure out a name for it. And I didn't want just the standard sort of like real estate investing thing, so I wanted just something different. And I'm into aviation, so that's where the propeller thing comes from. But so I got Lead Propeller, and I was so excited about it that it was available, and I got it. And I called my wife, and she was driving somewhere with the kids, and I said, "Hey, I got Lead Propeller, is available. I really love the name and stuff." And she immediately asked me, how did you spell it? And I thought, oh no. Like I didn't even know how to spell this. Like, I think I spelled it with an O-R at the end. And she's like, no, that's not right. So then of course, my heart sank and I went to check. And of course it was taken, like the correct spelling was taken. Somebody actually already had leadpropeller.com.
Oh, wow.
But they sold it to me for a cheap price. So it still worked out.
Yeah, I've done that before. I misspelled it. I when we did set up our real estate company, I misspelled it and registered for 10 years.
Oh, nice.
So I've been there.
And for people that don't know, sometimes it is better to register for long term. It's better for SEO because they can see that you're committed to really having a quality site by registering it for more than 1 year.
Right.
But awesome. So 5minuteflip.com or the5minuteflip.com or any other way that you can think to possibly say that. I'm sure you'll find him because he's got all the domain names for it.
Absolutely.
But really awesome to hear, and thank you very much, Don. And we'll put the links to that, and then also to be able to people to be able to see your agreement on the show notes page at flippingjunkie.com/36. All right, Don. Well, thank you very much for spending time with us.
All right, Danny. Thank you.
Yeah, have a good day.
You too.
All right, everybody. Another great episode, Flipping Junkie podcast. Talked about joint venturing to fund flips. Awesome way to do it if you're just getting started and don't have any money. Like Don did. He didn't have enough money to spend on a bunch of marketing, things like that. He still made it happen, made it work, and you can do the same thing. He had talked about some of the deals. He does different deals. He does a lot of joint venturing, but then does some wholesale deals and things like that too. And, we just wholesaled put under contract to sell 2 wholesale deals this last week. Going to make about $20,000 a piece on those. It was pretty awesome. And, as we were putting them out there to our people, setting up our wholesale websites, listings that we put those deals out there, I was thinking, wow, I take a lot of this technology that we have for granted. Basically was able to set up those listings just within a matter of seconds, about a minute, because the information's already in REI Mobile that I have, and it's linked up to my lead propeller, so I can just submit to use all that same info and do a little bit of worded changes to create a listing right onto my wholesaling website. If you want to see my wholesaling website, feel free to go to cheapsanantoniohouses.com, and you can check out my wholesaling site. So that's where the listings go. And then from REI Mobile, I can quickly just set up an email that goes out to all my investors that are in there. So when they submit information to join my cash buyers list from my cheapsanantoniohouses.com, that goes into REI Mobile into my investor list. And so when I have a deal, all I have to do is from that lead record, create an email using a wholesale deal template, and it pulls in a lot of the data, and all I've got to do is change like the price and stuff like that I'm asking as a wholesale sell for that deal. So it makes it very quick and very simple. It's pretty awesome to see that work and to be able to get these houses sold so quickly without having to redo a bunch of stuff and re-enter a bunch of the same details for properties. So if you're using separate systems like MailChimp and stuff like that, you've got to always type up all those emails and do all that kind of stuff. This saves you a ton of time and gets you a lot more exposure. But anyway, you can check out all that stuff that we have. Like I said, sometimes I feel like I'm taking, I take it for granted that we've got all this ease because of the fact that we built all this stuff for ourselves to use to make our lives easier as investors, and you have access to it too if you want to sign up for those. So it's leadpropeller.com is the website. You can get one of those wholesaling websites there. And then reimobile.com is the CRM system. So that's reimobile.com. Check them out. And thanks again for listening to the podcast. Hope you guys have a great week. We'll be on next week with Chris Jameson talking about hard money lending. So tune in for that and have a good one.